Because let's face it, failure freaking stings, no matter how much, right? No matter how successful you are, failure still stings. And so making sure.
I think you gotta have a dream.
The School of Greatness.
Really? Yeah.
Please welcome Lewis Howes.
Has the massive success for both of you, or either one of you, tested the relationship in a big way? Or has the money, the followers, the notoriety, the accomplishments done nothing to affect or test the relationship?
Oh, that's such a great question. So here's the thing. I think any evolution is a test. So whether it's on a grand scale of you're building a following, you're building a business, or just, hey, you've got a different job.
Right.
Like everything like that becomes a, how are we going to maneuver this situation because it's different to what we used to. So we've kind of done that all along the way, from the point of like, my dad saying no to Tom asking him if he could marry me.
Yes.
Okay, well, what does that look like going against the family, going against my culture, marrying someone that's outside of the Greek Orthodox religion? So like every step of the way, of course, it's absolutely been a challenge. Me starting my own show, I was always behind the scenes. I was like, so I went from the supportive wife staying at home for 8 years. Then I went to, I'll help you with this small startup company called Quest Nutrition. And it's like, I'll just help, babe. I'm a good supportive wife. What we didn't expect is it would grow at 57,000%. So in that growth, I started off as, I'm just going to help, to now I'm a full-time pledged, like building out our shipping department. That transition of me taking care of him day in, day out. I mean, literally, Lewis, he'd wake up, his gym clothes were next to him. He'd go to the gym, his work clothes were outside the bath, so that when he got out of the shower, they were ready. He would go to work, I'd had to hand him a lunch. He'd come home, his dinner was ready. He didn't have to think about anything. And then we start Quest, and now I'm full-time at Quest and trying to be a great stay-at-home wife. That navigation, I'm sure you know many people, we all try and do everything. So first of all, I tried to navigate, how do I do it both perfectly?
Yeah, it's not possible. It's not possible to be one perfect, really,
No, you end up doing nothing perfectly. So that's ended up what happening. I ended up failing, feeling like I wasn't being a great housewife, being a great supportive wife, and that I wasn't actually crushing it at work. So I had to make a choice. Do I stay at home or do I take entrepreneurship? And I decided I loved exploring what I was made of, what I could do. So it's like, I want to work every day. So now back to your question, how the hell do I communicate with the love of my life that while I love him more than life itself, I don't want to take care of him anymore. I don't want to cook for him anymore. I don't want to put his clothes out. Like, it is not fulfilling. And that was one of, I think, our biggest tests that we had. And so it was how we handled that, how I came into the conversation, how we really sat down and just said, let's just communicate. This isn't about me doing something wrong, about you doing something wrong. This is just about emotions and feelings. And so how do I go in this conversation and let him know how I'm feeling? Because I'm the one changing. I recognized I was the one that had gone from, hey, I'm going to support you, to now, I don't really want to take care of you at all.
Well, not in those ways anymore, right? You want to take care of in other ways, by connection, intimacy, and love and affection, but not...
In the materialistic, your clothes are going to be put out, things like that. So we had to, like, it was a learning.
How long did that take until you felt like you were in a flow and a rhythm where he was fully in acceptance of that new role that you wanted to live into?
So here's the thing, Lewis. I think it always comes with, we have to accept it first. And I was trying to do both.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
And until I could accept, Lisa, you have to make a choice. There's no right or wrong, but you have to make a choice right now because you're not doing anything great and you're feeling like that anxiousness where you're trying to do everything, it's just not serving you and not serving your goals. So the first step was, how do I communicate this with Tom? So I kind of sat back and I said, what would I want him to say to me? So I'm changing the game. I'm now saying to him, hey, you know when we got married, I said I wanted 4 children and I would take care of you. I now want 0 children and I don't want to take care of you when it comes to food and things like that. So I had to recognize I was changing the game.
Interesting.
And so what would I want someone to say to me if it was the other way around?
You were changing essentially the ground rules. Essentially you said, I'm committing and promising to this lifestyle. Let's say I want kids, I want to be supportive and take care of you in this certain way. And that's what he signed up for.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you signed up for.
100%.
Not saying you can't do that, but how does someone have that conversation? Whether, anyone in that relationship, I said I wanted this before marriage, but now actually I want something completely opposite.
Yeah, I love this question so much. So it's the first thing, give the gift that you would want. So for me, I would want Tom to come in and recognize that he's the one changing. Because there's some psychological trick. You know when someone comes in and is like, oh, I'm changing, you got a problem now? What do you mean you got a problem with that? Like, there's that like, hang on a minute, you're kind of pushing me into a corner
If
here.
he brought this to you and said, I want something different, you mean? Yeah, gotcha.
I would want him to say, hey babe, I recognize I'm the one changing. There's going to be a change here. How do we do it together? Versus, I'm changing and now you have to deal with it.
Right.
So I said, okay, first step is recognize I'm the one changing. Then go in and give him grace and space to have feelings about it. Like, he may hate it. It may really upset him. But I can't control that. I need to give him the space to have that feeling.
Right.
So I sat down and I said, okay, babe, I recognize I'm changing, but this is making me so happy. I didn't voice how unhappy I was. That's on me, that's not him.
Really?
I didn't voice how unhappy I was for 8 years. But now I've recognized how unhappy I am because I've realized what I'm made of. You know, starting Quest and being a part of it and learning all these new skills. Like, it lights me up.
Yes.
And now I've seen the light. I can't go backwards.
Right.
And
what would you say you were on a scale of 1 to 10? Let's call it the self-love scale. Before you made that decision and had that conversation with Tom. 1 being you didn't love yourself or have any confidence. 10 being you had a lot of self-love and a lot of confidence and inner peace. Where would you have been on that scale?
a 1?
Really?
Yeah.
A 1?
Oh, my confidence was ridiculous. Even as I'm telling you this, it's not that I had the confidence to say it. That's what radical confidence is all about. It's like, look, you may not feel amazing. You may not feel confident in this thing. But in order to get to what you want in life, you have to take that step forward. And we all focus on wanting to feel great about doing something. And I just say, I'm not going to wait to feel great. So right now, I know I have to have this conversation with Tom.
Yeah.
I don't feel confident about having it, but I have the radical confidence, which means I need to have a game plan.
Yes.
I need to go in. I really need to think about it. I need to have steps of what I'm going to say, create words around it so that when I'm there, even if I don't have the confidence, I can still have the conversation. And so that's what I did. I literally went in and said, give the man grace to have his feelings. Give him space to voice his opinion. Express to him that I was unhappy and I never said that to him.
Right. So it wasn't on him.
Correct.
Interesting.
And then say why I'm making the change. And so I was like, this new entrepreneurship thing, babe, I was like, I've never felt so alive. I was like, I never felt so alive. I can't believe this is my life. And so as I'm telling him this whole story of how I'm feeling, I was like, look, I recognize I'm changing. So right now you're used to me putting your clothes out for you, to cook him every meal. So in order to show you the respect that I'm changing and that it's going to be a difficult transition, there's always a transition, why don't I wean you off
Right.
me taking care of you?
Yes.
So we created the game plan. He's like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, next week, I'll just do 6 days a week instead of 7.
And then 5.
The week after,
yeah.
I'll do 5. Then the week after, I'll do 4. Then the week after, I'll do 3. And then, babe, because this is my language. I want to feel like an amazing wife. I want to cook for you on Saturdays and Sundays. So he was like, okay, that sounds good. If it's difficult along the way, I'll voice my
talk
opinion.
about it, yeah.
So I was like, absolutely. Now, it got to the point where I was doing laundry like once a month because I was just like, it's not important. I spent 8 years of my life focused on, do these socks match?
Wow.
Like I was filling my days with tiny distractions about laundry, about going to Costco, about freaking matching socks. And so now I'm like, I don't care. It's not going to move my life forward. And so making that decision, telling him, I don't freaking care if you've got clean underwear or not, ended up preparing us for the day where he was like, oh, I don't have any clean underwear. I guess I'm going commando. And so he goes to work commando because he's like, what's more important, a happy wife or a little discomfort?
Was there ever a time in the first year or two of the marriage and in this agreement that commitment that you made, I guess, that this is the vision you had for the marriage, where you were happier doing these things, where you were happy being that role that you wanted to be in or thought you wanted to be in?
No.
Never.
So here was what happened. When we first started, it was like we both wanted to make movies. We both had jobs in films. And I was on set one day and I had an actor throw a matchbox at me in anger because I was holding out for the props department and I didn't have another matchbox to replace it. And so he literally throws a matchbox at me. And I was like, I'm filling in. Like, you don't disrespect people like that. I literally don't care who you are. You don't disrespect people like that. I don't deserve that. And so I went home and my heart was broken. Tom had a really bad experience in film as well. So we came to the conclusion, let's just make our own money. Louis, it should be easy, right? Let's just go out. Let's make enough money for a month, a year and a half, and then we'll make our own film.
You mean start your own business?
Yeah. Right. But back then, it was like, we didn't even know, like, we didn't even have that word. It was like, let's just try and make enough money. So what we did in that moment is we said, cool, let's look at the world at large. Who are the most successful people and how do they live their lives? And what Tom had just read an article with Steve Jobs where he talks about always wearing the same shirt, like black. Because he's like, he doesn't want to freaking spend one decision making on what he's going to wear. Because, you know, we all have a certain amount of decision making we can make in a day with clarity. So we were like, what if I'm like your black shirt, your version of your black shirt? I'll make all decisions. I'll make all decisions outside of work. You go focus on work, and this is how we're going to make a lot of money in a year and a half. So we pinky swore. It was like a deal. It was like, I can handle that. I can cook and clean for a year and a half, because it was all in the bigger service of making movies. And here's the thing. How many of us get stuck in a pattern? How many of us get used to a certain way of doing life? And the mindset that we tell ourselves, I should be doing this. And my upbringing, being a Greek Orthodox, I fell into a habit that my parents told me I would fall into, in the sense of, my dad said, you're going to be a stay-at-home wife. I don't care what you're studying at university, you're going to be a stay-at-home wife in a way.
Right. Eventually you're going to play that role,
Yeah. So like these small subliminal messages that I got from my dad, that I got from my grandmother, that I got from every which way growing up, that being a Greek woman meant I was going to be a stay-at-home wife. When I found myself in that position, I started to find ways that I could self-soothe.
What were those self-soothing ways?
It becomes distractions. So I kept telling myself, it's for the greater good, Lisa, it's the greater good. It's just for a year and a half, it's for the greater good. You know.
And that turns into 8 years.
That turns into 8 years. Because, and I don't know about you, but do you play poker?
Sometimes.
Okay,
Yeah.
But you know, like the phrase "pot committed."
Yes,
well, you've
you're
already invested enough money, and you're like, well, I do have enough money for another hand, but God, I've put so much money into it. Screw it, might as well put it all in, even if your hand's bad.
Yes.
Because you're like, well, I'm pot committed. I did that every single year. So Tom kept coming home. He kept saying, babe, I just need another year and a half. I start feeling like, well, I'm the good supportive wife. Of course, babe. Of course, babe. So I'm reassuring myself emotionally that I'm the good supportive wife. Of course, it's just for another year and a half. I'm self-soothing by telling myself it's just another year and a half. And anytime I think, should we really be doing this? I start using the idea that, well, you've come this far. You can't fail now. But you're pot committed, Lisa. I literally want to like punch myself in the face, because when I think about how many more years I spent doing something that I wasn't satisfied in, that I was unhappy, because I'd already spent so many years.
Right.
Like that's such a, it's a heartbreaking mindset.
So it wasn't like it was his fault or something for saying, this is what I'm looking to do, and you've been amazing. Thank you for supporting me. This is what you said you were going to do anyways, so this is working out in his mind, right?
Yeah.
But for you were realizing you're at a 1 or a 2 maybe on a good day most of those years on self-love, self-confidence, right?
100%.
So it wasn't until you spoke up, really.
Yeah, it was all me, 100%. And here's the thing. I always thought, how on earth can I say I need a new life, or I need a different life? Like, how ungrateful am I right now when my husband's going out,
busting his butt every day.
Yeah, but I didn't have to work. I was a stay-at-home wife. Like, when I think about the world and how much hardship there is on certain people, how ungrateful am I to ask for more, Lewis? And here's the thing that I'm really struggling with gratitude. I use gratitude every day to self-soothe. I've got a roof over my head, how lucky am I? I've got a husband that loves me, how lucky am I? And at the same time, anytime I thought of moments of unhappiness, I kept using the gratitude, and it kept me there.
Kept you staying there,
Kept me there for 8 years. So like that really like haunts me, because I think gratitude can be amazing. I think it puts a new perspective on your life, right? If you're feeling like, why me? You know, you've got a victim mentality. I think thinking of the positive is a beautiful way of reframing things. Of saying, yes, this is going terrible in my life, but look at all this amazing stuff. but it also can absolutely derail you from asking for a better life. And what I realized after my entire journey and even writing this book is you can be absolutely in love with certain parts of your life. You can be head over heels in a relationship and freaking hate your business. And you have every right to ask for more. You have every right to want more. And I didn't think I did. And I didn't think I deserved to. And so for 8 years, I was just waiting for when. I was waiting for when my husband was happy.
Sure.
When we made enough money. When I felt confident enough to speak up about my unhappiness. And as we all know, the when sometimes never comes.
Right. Well, it sounds to me like there was no mission that you had.
No mission.
It was like, okay, I'm here to do this supportive role, but there wasn't a mission or a purpose moving forward. Like there wasn't kids in the future. There wasn't something you were building together, is what I'm hearing, right?
Well, we were building something together. And I think that's the problem, is that we can convince ourselves we're still moving towards that goal. And so for 8 years, I kept convincing myself, but Lisa, you're still moving towards the goal. You're earning more money. You're earning more money. One day you'll be able to make movies. And that's, I think, where the problem lies.
Right. So it was all for the fact of making a movie together eventually. Interesting. What do you wish you would have told yourself every night to check in or assess the conversations you need to be having differently?
That you don't need to have confidence to speak up and say what you really want in life. Like, confidence is like the byproduct. It's like you're really freaking scared about doing something. You try it, you fail, you fall on your face, you embarrass yourself, you learn the lesson, you pick yourself back up, and you like rinse and repeat, and you keep going. And as you keep going, as you keep falling on the floor, getting yourself back up, learning the lesson, you build competence. Once you get the competence, then you slowly get the confidence. So the confidence comes afterwards. And what I was waiting for is I was waiting to feel good about myself. I was waiting for that freaking negative voice in my head. I literally was waiting for her to stop talking. I was waiting for her to be nicer. And what I didn't realize is it wasn't coming. And so I had to do it anyway. But to my point is telling someone, yeah, I know you're scared, but do it anyway. It doesn't help. When you've got anxiety, when you're depressed, when you're like really in your own head, telling someone to do something doesn't help.
What should you tell them instead?
You need a game plan. You need to step back and actually think about things. So the analogy I kind of use, or not the analogy, but the example I use is when I was going to step on stage for the first time. I've seen you, Mel Robbins, my husband, Ed Milet, like you guys are amazing.
When was this first time? Do you remember?
So this was probably 4 years ago. Maybe 3.5.
Which event was this?
So I kept getting asked to get on stage. And I was like, are you joking? Like, why would I ever do that? It looks like it's the most scariest thing in the world.
It's terrifying. If you've never done it, like I remember when I first started, it was terrifying for years.
Right. But why would you do it then, Lewis? It's like, that's how I felt.
Well, I did it because I had a meaningful mission. I had a mission that I wanted to serve and impact people and be of service to helping people improve. And I knew that I needed to use my voice in some way, whether it be, I wasn't a movie maker, so that could be a way of expressing yourself. I was like, I'm not that great of a writer. I got to learn how to speak and communicate a message. So that's when I started it.
Okay. I love that so much. Now, here's the thing. Seeing someone like you on stage, seeing someone like my husband on stage when you've got the mission is amazing. But even if I have the mission, how do I actually step on stage?
Know. It's hard.
It's so scary.
It's terrifying.
And so telling people, well, just do it, or like, it's terrifying, but you'll figure it out. It didn't help me. And so I said, I think I'm like so many other people because I can't just do it. And so I had to have a game plan. That's what I call radical confidence. So I stepped back and I said, all right. So in fact, Tom was the first one that said to me, Lisa, babe, you keep saying, like at this point we had a mission, we'd built impact theory, and our mission is to impact people. So he's like, you realize that you keep saying no to these speaking gigs, and you realize it's getting in the way of the mission that you said to impact. He's like, no pressure, it's your life, but I just, as your partner, I'm gonna be honest with you. So I had to sit back and I was like, all right, stepping on stage, would that serve my mission, yes or no? Yes. Okay. Not stepping on stage. Why am I not doing it? Because I'm petrified. All right. With no judgment now, what is more important? My ego or my goals?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just ask yourself with no judgment. It's not about other people. You don't have to ever get on stage, Lisa. This isn't about other people and how good everyone else is and how much other people can step on stage. This is just about you looking nakedly at the situation and making a decision. So I said, impact is more important than my ego.
Right.
Okay, great. How do I use that to now step on stage? Okay, I've got my North Star. What is the voice in my head so worried about? Like, let the ego speak. What is it worried about? Lisa, you don't know what the hell you're going to do on stage. All right, ego. Actually, you're right. So I have a chapter. It's like turn your negative voice from your bitch to your BFF. Because it's like she would be crippling. And now I treat it like my best friend. How can I listen to her? Like a friend. I know what you're saying isn't very nice, but as a friend, you want what's best for me. So tell me, what do I need to know? You're going to get a stage and you have no idea what you're doing. Okay, great. The negative voice is telling me to prepare. I better freaking prepare. So I sat down, I had coaching sessions for my husband. I booked time with him. I was like, all right, babe, I need you to coach me, help me. I did my speech. I read it in front of him. I kept booking meetings with him where I'd read to him in real time. I then had my whole team there where I would practice. So now I'm allowing the negative voice in my head, the thing that my ego that is worried I'm going to embarrass myself, that is worried that I'm going to be shameful, that I'm going to fall on my face. I'm letting her speak. I'm taking the message. I'm learning the lesson and I'm using it. So, okay, great practice. Amazing. Next thing, what is the negative voice saying? Even if you're prepared, how on earth are you going to step on stage? Because you've got imposter syndrome. Okay, great. What are the tools I can get and put on or use to my advantage because I know I need my emotions to boost me on stage? All right, instead of just saying do it anyway, come up with a game plan. Number one, I know music empowers me. Put on Destiny's Child, I'm a survivor, and I dare anyone at home to not feel the fire lit up under their butt. So number one, find a song, find your hype song. So I had my song ready. What happens when you give a kid a cape, Lewis?
They act like a superhero.
Immediately, right?
Yeah.
They got the fist in the air. As kids, we associate clothing with how we feel. Think symbols, but we don't do that as adults. Well, look at my hair.
Right.
Look at my necklace, my Wonder Woman necklace. Even this watch, which you guys mentioned when I first sat, it's kind of like my Wonder Woman cuffs.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I have a uniform. And I lean into it. This isn't accidental. Every time I put on this cheapy Wonder Woman necklace for like a month, every time I would put it on, I would repeat to myself, you're a badass like Wonder Woman. Repetition creates habit. So what I ended up doing is created a habit of every time now I put this on, I'm telling myself a message. So I lent into all of these things.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's your uniform to go on stage? So now I've got my uniform, I've got my hair, and then the final thing is my bad bitch boots.
Okay.
So these are knee-high boots that I didn't accidentally call them bad bitch boots. I deliberately gave them a name that every time I would put them on would make me feel a certain way. You do this leading up to the event. It doesn't have to be boots, it can be anything. But every time I did, I would zip them up, Lewis, and I would be like, yeah, my bad bitch boots.
I like that. Yeah.
So that as I'm getting dressed to go on stage, what am I telling myself automatically now as I'm getting ready? I got my Wonder Woman necklace, I got my bad bitch boots on, I got my hype song with that I'm listening to on stage, and then the final little things that I did was I set an alarm in my phone. Any motivating alarm that you want. I closed my eyes. I did you got this with like a little emoji, and I closed my eyes and I spun it. And for a month, I had it go off at random times. Now, sometimes it's obviously inappropriate times. It's in the middle of a meeting or an interview. But literally, it would be random moments because what I wanted to do is subliminally tell myself at any moment, catch me off guard, that I got this. So that when I'm going on stage, none of it was by accident. I needed the game plan. Now, the final thing was I let the voice speak, and the voice was saying, but what if you freeze? You've seen it, I've seen it so many times where someone's on stage and they mess up and they freeze. You feel uncomfortable for them,
so
right?
bad, yeah.
It's so heartbreaking. So I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make it that would be really heartbreaking for me. So come up with a game plan. You've heard the thing that you're worried about. Now find something else to do in order to mitigate that. So I was like, all right, what can I do? Kids, when they fall on the floor, what do? They look at their parent to kind of see, should I be crying right now or am I okay? And if the parent's chill, the kid's like, okay, I guess I'm fine. So they all look to you. So I said, if I'm nervous, if I'm tense, then of course everyone else is going to be tense. So I needed a game plan that if I froze, what am I going to do? I said to myself, Lisa, laugh. That was it.
Right.
Just laugh at your mistake. I don't know how I'm going to laugh or why I'm going to laugh, but that was
Start
my
laughing,
instruction. Just
yeah.
start laughing at your mistake. Because everyone knows you've messed up. So to hide it only makes everyone else more tense. So that was my game plan. I'm going to laugh. As soon as I get on stage, I'm like 3 minutes in.
You start laughing.
I tell them, I made them a huge error. I start telling a story about my grandparents. And I say when my dad gave birth to my grandmother, which of course was a massive error. And I was like, well, that would be weird. And I just started laughing. Everyone started laughing too. And I moved on. And no one remembered it. Like everyone else moved on too. So that's how, literally, I just broke down tiny little steps that I went from the person that was like, I'm never going to get on stage. Why would I ever do that to myself? That sounds like a miserable life. To deciding I'm going to get on stage. And then how on earth I actually get there. Oh, and I don't think I actually said this, but the first thing was, my first gig ended up being TEDx.
Wow.
So I made the commitment. The very next person that asks, I'm going to say yes.
And that was the next one.
That was the next one. But that was key.
That's good.
I made a promise to myself.
That's good.
And it was a decision. And the reason why I just said I had to say yes is because I knew myself and I knew that I'd bulk. I wouldn't do it if I didn't make that
and you keep
commitment.
delaying it as well. I love that you had this game plan. And this is something interesting. When you walked in here, I've got a bunch of, a little basketball game. I've got memorabilia from my sports days. And you said, I forgot that you used to be an athlete because you met me when I was kind of in the podcasting world. But I had a whole nother life playing sports. And in sports, you essentially talked about everything that I was trying to figure out how to do in sports because I was scared to play sports in big moments, big games. I'd be afraid. Be afraid of messing up. I'd be afraid of failing. I'd be afraid of looking bad, all these different things. And I'm so grateful that I learned a lot of these things about that you just shared in sports because we wore a uniform. So every time I got on the field, we put on a uniform and I felt like a warrior, right? So when I put on the uniform, I felt like a warrior. So I think the uniform as an adult is still as powerful. It's almost like we created an alter ego in sports, right? I used to say, man, Jerry Rice, if I could be like him. And then I would imagine myself and wear the things like him and act like him when I would get on the field. When I stepped across the line, it was like I became Jerry Rice. And that alter ego, when you put on the Wonder Woman necklace, when you put on the watch, all these things, it's almost like creating an alter ego of your greatest self.
Yeah.
The person that's not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
The insecure little child or whatever it is inside of us that holds us back. So I think it's really cool that you're living this as an adult where most people don't. Maybe they do this in sports sometimes, but they don't do this afterwards.
Yeah, it's so true. Except unless you're Beyonce and you create Sasha Fierce.
Exactly, yeah. There's some musicians that do it as well, but I think it's powerful. Why would we not do this in our day-to-day life?
Yeah.
Or in our businesses or in our relationships if we feel afraid? Like, why wouldn't we step into something greater than ourselves and become that? Become that image that we want to be. So I think it's really cool.
Why do you think we don't?
Probably we don't have the tools and we've never tried it before. So I was lucky that I got to experience sports psychology when I was playing sports because it was available and I started researching for it and I started asking my coaches. I think another thing that I've really done that I think you probably do with Tom is having a coach before you go on stage. We had a coach. Everything that you were sharing, I was like, yep. We had the uniform, we had the alter ego. Everyone would have headphones on when you're riding to the stadium because everyone's nervous. So you put on Eminem, Lose Yourself, and it's like, so everything you were saying, I was like, man, that was like my sports life. And the last thing was you have a coach right before you go into, the battlefield of the sports arena. You have a coach give you one more reminder. Okay, guys, here's what we're gonna do today. Focus on this, this, and this. It's like let go of everything else and focus. And so I would have a coach when I would get on stage because even though I'd practice a lot, I'd still be nervous, still be insecure. And I got to the point where I would call a coach maybe a couple hours before and just, if I had any nerves, like just walk me through it, get me back on my intention. My intention is to serve. It's not about how I look. It's not about trying to be funny or intelligent on stage. It's about serving the audience. And so that little kind of coaching pep talk from sports, I still do in life. And it helps me a lot. So you probably get that with Tom anyways.
But the funny thing is, as you were talking, I was like, who is my coach? So yes, 100% it's him. But right before, something actually, as you were talking in real time, I was like, oh my God, I realize what I do. I'm my own coach.
You coach yourself. That's great.
I always go to, so in fact, I've noticed, I go to the restroom and I always look in the mirror and I'm like, got this.
That's
And I
great.
do like this, like, you got this. Like, it's kind of like me against me. I got a question
course.
for you. So you just said that you have your coach that says, but then you remind yourself that you're there to serve.
Absolutely.
Is that not pressure?
It takes all the pressure off me.
It does.
Yeah, because otherwise, at least for me, when I started speaking, it was in 2008, 2009 when I got into it because I was so terrified of it. Afterwards being like, I kind of messed it up, and did I look good? And always asking for kind of approval and wanting the approval of the audience or peers or whatever it might be. I was always worried how I looked or how I came across. Or was I the most interesting speaker? Or did I give the best presentation? Or could I have done something different or told a different story? So I was always critical, I would say in a negative way, as opposed to analyzing, based on how could I improve to serve the mission greater. And so when the mission for me shifted from looking good to serving the people the best way possible, knowing that I'm going to mess up, knowing that I'm not going to be perfect, knowing that I'm not going to be able to connect with everyone. Also, my story's not going to resonate. Some people are going to be just distracted or in their own head or whatever, and I may not be able to connect with them. As opposed to beating myself up, it's just about, okay, if I impacted one person today, then I did the best I could. So it's getting feedback on how to improve, but also celebrating the service, not the way I looked.
I love that so much, and something you just said that I just picked up on that I do is that, did I give it my best?
Yeah.
Because even the serving someone makes me nervous. Because
Right.
it's like, what if I
Interesting.
didn't? Now I'm just like, Lisa,
Do your best, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So even with this book, so when Tom came to me, we had the whole thing behind the scenes about like Tom had the book offer and was he going to take it or not, and then he said no. But then they hit Tom up and said, would Lisa be interested in writing a book? So he comes into my office one day during COVID and he's like, babe, like they just asked if you want to write a book.
That's big.
And I was at my computer, I was like, oh, that's nice. And I went back to typing. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, babe, did you hear what I just said? Like, they just asked if you want to write a book. I said, yeah, I just said that's very sweet. He goes, why are you being so freaking like nonchalant about it? This is a big deal. The words that came out of my mouth was, who would buy a book from me?
Interesting.
Now, this is a year and a half ago. I've already built a $1 billion company. Impact Theory already has like over 500 million views on our
Women
content.
of Impact is blowing up. Yeah,
all of that. And yet I still had the negative mindset or the negative voice in my head that says that. So the great news is I just embrace her now. I'm like, the 14-year-old insecure Lisa is still there. That's amazing. It's okay. I got you. We're going to do this together. Like, I kind of coach myself. And then to your point about like serving someone, I was so stressed about what if it doesn't create impact? And I was like, I have to reframe how I think right now.
Yes.
Because right now, I think I would hold my identity and my worth to if it actually changes someone's life. So now I'm looking external for the validation. And I was like, that's a dangerous place
Very
to be,
dangerous.
Lisa. So now I have to do the internal work before I even release the book.
Yes.
What does the internal work look like? All right, number one, did you do your research? You went in as a novice. Don't pretend you know your shit. You went in not knowing what you're doing. You've never written a book before. So go in with the grace that you've never written a book and now research. So I called up a lot of our friends. Like, I literally had like 10 questions. Mel Robbins,
Sure.
Marie Forleo. Like, I'm like, all right, guys, what are the things I don't know? What are the traps I'm about to get into? What's the biggest surprise? What's the most amazing thing? And I just did my research. I made a promise to myself. Cool. Step 2. Give it your all.
Yes.
Because if I've given it my all, and we all know if we've given it our all, right, we can't con ourselves. You may be able to con everyone else. Say, oh my God, I gave it everything. But when you're alone at night, you know whether you actually did give it your all or not. So I was like, if I can, when I'm alone, be proud that I gave it every ounce of me, that I didn't make excuses, that I didn't give all the reasons why I didn't show up. If I know that I gave it everything, I've left it all out on the table. There's nowhere else for me to go. And by golly, I can be proud of that. I went from the person that said, who the hell would buy a book from me? And I freaking wrote a book. I need to be proud of that.
Yes.
And so every step of the way over the year of writing the book, I kept going back to make sure you don't get external validation or your worth tied to the results of whether this book does well or not. And that's how I've actually coached myself over this last year. I've done the foundation to where you now see me, where it's like, I've got a book. I don't know if it will do well, but I'm so freaking proud. And here's
That's great.
the last thing. If it totally tanks, you better believe I'm going to say, oh, why did it tank? let me take out my book and let me, my little notepad and let me write down all the ways in which I've learned of why it tanked.
That's powerful. You know what's interesting is I learned a really strong lesson for myself because my first book hit a New York Times bestseller list, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do this every time. My second book, I remember going into it with this intention. My agent at the time, he said, let's go after, let's do a different type of a book. I wanted to write a book about how men can heal their traumas, essentially, which I knew wasn't going to be this massive, big thing, because it's kind of hard to sell a book to guys to talk about their inner feelings. But I said to myself, this just needs to get out of me. It needs to get out of me to help, if it can help one guy heal and mend a relationship, it'll be worth it. But the ego crept in when it launched, and I was thinking, oh, this thing's doing really well, and it's selling really well, and it should hit the New York Times list, and it didn't hit it. And I remember for about 24 hours, I was really upset. My ego came out, and I was really upset, I was frustrated, all these things. And then eventually I allowed myself to relax and say, why did I do this in the first place? It was to help if one man can heal, it'd be worth it. And that intention saves me a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And so I think your intention of writing this and writing a book that you're proud of, independent of the results, is what we should all be thinking about when we create something. The challenge is we want to get big results.
Yeah.
You want it to do really well. Everyone wants to do the thing well that they're doing. So how do they overcome the anxiety or the stress of the result when they put their life into something?
Yeah, I think it's you really have to process it beforehand. You have to actually assess what, it's like people just I want to be successful, I want to be happy. What does that actually mean? What does success actually mean to you? You have to define it so much so that you know what that North Star is. Because let's say people are listening, they have a goal in mind. They have to know exactly precisely what that goal is. For me, the goal was write a book that creates impact. Now look, attach that. I'd love for it to be in New York Times #1, but that is so me looking outside of myself, and there's certain element of I can't control it. Right? Of course, you can come in with all the intention. What are my marketing strategies? Yes. How am I going to do this? Who am I going to hit? All of that, be very intentional. But at the end of the day, no matter how much intention you have, the success is never guaranteed. This was actually something that Tom taught me. Right. He's like, the struggle is for certain. The results aren't guaranteed. So now, are you enjoying the journey? Are you enjoying the struggle every step? So to your point of reminding yourself, but why did you do this? You need to get it out of you. And those are the things that I think are very imperative to establish before you get started. Because let's face it, failure freaking stings. No matter how much, right? No matter how successful you are, failure still stings. And so making sure you don't allow that failure to cripple you, making sure you don't allow that failure to keep you stuck, to me, is my main goal. Literally, that is my North Star. Whatever you try, Lisa, you cannot use the success or the failure of it to dictate what you're going to do next. And so for me, it's how do I reframe failure? How do I think of failure? How do we process failure? That's such an important thing for us, I think, to do, so that if it happens, you're not left not knowing, not having a strategy, and actually thinking it's about you.
Yes. You've got this book coming out. Women of Impact has been crushing. You've been extremely successful independently yourself with your own identity outside of what it used to be in the marriage, right? Has your success tested the relationship?
Yes.
In the last, few years since you've kind of been blowing up now?
So it's interesting. The reason why I said yes is I didn't actually realize that you were going to say as in popularity. When I was behind the camera and I stepped in front of the camera the first or second time, Tom, literally in front of the entire company, he's like, my wife's going to be bigger than me and I have zero problem with it. He's like, mark my words. He wants it. He's like, he doesn't love being in front of the camera. He's very good at it, but he loves the impact. Yes. The camera is just the tool for him. I freaking love this, just hanging with you and the idea of creating impact and staring at the camera. This could create, who knows where this can go, right? That is such excitement and beauty to me. So the size and popularity, no. But when I went from being a housewife who supported him to being an entrepreneur, that was a big struggle for us. Because what happened was, when Quest was growing, our first facility was in Compton. And Tom, being very passionate and big brothering for a kid who lived in the inner cities, he said it was very important for us to help the inner city people. So when we started Quest, we put out a call and we said, we don't care about your background. We don't care if if you're an ex-convict. We don't care. All we care about is who are you today and who are you willing to become, and are you willing to work hard? And that's it. So now we put a call out, and so literally we had lines and lines and lines of people that were looking for a job.
Wow.
So flash forward, Quest grows 57,000%. I've now got a facility, about 10,000 square feet, 40 employees underneath me within 2 years.
Wow.
I went from shipping on my living room floor, not knowing how to be a boss, to then 40 employees. Now, a lot of them are ex-convicts. A lot of them are much bigger than me, right? They're like your stature.
Sure.
I'm 5'1". You can like pick me up with your pinky. So what I thought, bad advice, but what I thought I should do is go in there and be aggressive, because show them you can't be pushed around, Lisa. That's the only way I know how. And a lot of the female entrepreneurships back then as well, this is like 2010-ish, 11, were all about basically don't show emotion and you have to be like a dude.
Right.
And so I went in there thinking, okay, I'm not going to get pushed around. And so I'm going to go there and I'm going to bark orders and I'm going to tell them, I'm a stern, you can't push me around. Now, you can imagine that didn't motivate any of my team. That was a total disaster. And what that ended up doing, it started to harden me. And one day, Tom pulled me aside in our personal when we got home and he said, babe, I love you, but you're hardening. And you're hardening to a point where now you're bringing this into our relationship.
Ooh.
And he said, and look, let's talk about it. I understand why you need to harden, because business is tough. So let's actually talk about it. But I want to talk about the lovely, sweet wife that I miss. And he's like, if you bring too much hardness to our relationship, he's like, it doesn't compute with me. He's like, I love your softness. I love that you care. I love that you have this big heart. And because you're starting to soften in business, you're starting to lose the softness in our relationship.
Right.
And so let's talk about that. And I was like, yeah, that's very fair. I love to be, like, I love it when he, like, wraps me around his arms, or like he carries me because my feet are sore. Like I love the fact that he's 6 foot. Like I love that about him. And so I was like, oh, you know what? As a relationship, you need to have space where your partner can say the truth, even if you don't agree. Like maybe I want to be hard, but I have to give him space to be heard. So I heard him out. And initially I was defending. I was like, but you don't understand why I have to be hard. It's okay for you. You're a guy. People respect you and blah, and I gave every reason why. And he's like, babe, I'm not saying like this isn't a skill set you need to grow. Of course you do. You have to, dominance is going to be very important in business. But how do we navigate what you're doing in business and our relationship? And so we just started. I was like, okay, that's very fair. When I come home, how do I soften? Because I like to be soft.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out what that strategy was. And so to the strategy that I said of how on earth I suit up to get on stage, I now do the opposite to soften. So literally, if I want to be a big ball of mush, which I really do enjoy being around my husband, you've seen me around him, like I'll sit on his lap and whatever. I do the opposite. I take my jewelry off. I put my hair up. I wear Wonder Woman fluffy pajama bottoms. Or like, in fact, I wear onesies. We have matching onesies that we wear every Saturday. And we match onesies because I want to feel that emotional connection with him on a personal level.
Yeah.
And so to be able to transition with work, your partner being your business partner for like 15 years, to how do you keep that spark alive and the romance alive? It's because you need to know how to navigate the two, where your strengths and weaknesses are, what those tactics are that you're going to use when you need to turn to them. Because sometimes I've gone balls to the freaking wall all day in business, and I'm like I've got hard because all day all I'm doing is making decisions. And now I come home and I got my husband wanting to give me a big squishy hug. How do I transition from one to the other? Knowing how to, having those tactics, testing yourself. What I can say will be different for you or your listeners at home, but you need to try things. Like I said, for me, it really was undoing the hair, the makeup, the jewelry, taking deep
Changing the
breaths,
uniform.
changing the uniform.
Yeah.
All these things are allowing me to navigate when I need to be a beast in business and when I want to be a big ball of mush.
I think that's really important for people to understand. I felt like, in the sports world, you see a lot of this in the news sometimes where there's domestic violence from like men with their wives or girlfriends, especially like football players, right? And there's no excuse for this. The challenge is learning how to turn off the destruction from sports. Let's call it football. Yeah. When you're trained to hit and destroy for hours a day and then trying to switch it off. Either way, when you're in business or sports or whatever it might be, we've got to learn those tools to transition from one area of life to the next area of life so we don't bring that. Otherwise, it will be destructive.
Yes.
So I think it's really cool you've learned that skill. What's been besides taking out the uniform, the makeup, and all these different things, is there something else you do psychologically to shift because you also got work from home and you live at home. So how do you shift psychologically?
Yeah, so I have a lot of tools. So one thing is smelling my husband's neck. I don't get to do that in business because it's business, right?
Yes.
He's on the other side and we're working, we're talking about strategies.
That's cool.
But getting that intimacy, we're literally like, it's so funny, we kind of have this thing now where like if I lean in, he'll just like expose his neck, or vice versa, he'll come out and I just expose my neck and there's something very vulnerable about exposing your neck to someone.
Absolutely.
So you would never do that in business, right? So number one, that's that intimacy. I do find music very helpful. So if I need to make a bit of a transition, I'll use music. But embracing that we're different people and that Tom's barometer of how much he can handle work to personal is going to be different than mine. How he handles the shift. So Tom works, the other day he calculated, it's not good, but he works 120 hours in a week. And so he can be on all the time. And he can transition to, okay, I'm on, 5 minutes I'm off, and now I'm back on again. I can't.
Right.
And so embracing that we're different people, we have different ways of doing things. And so what he would do is I would switch off at the end of the night and he would come in and be like, I just have a business question, this thing. I'm like, I'm off duty. But to your point, when you're working from home, your partner is your business partner as well. And so when he has a different habit, I was like, babe, you can't do this. And he's like, but what if I need something answered? How do I know when you're off duty? And I was like, okay, it's my responsibility to signal to you when and where, because boundaries are very important, but you can't expect someone else to set the boundaries for you, and you can't expect someone else to maintain those boundaries.
Right.
That's on me.
You've got to do that, yeah.
So I was like, okay, what boundaries do I have to set, and how do I make sure that he sticks to them? So I was like, all right, number one, the boundary is when I'm off duty, I can't have him come to me with a work issue. That's my boundary that I'm setting. All right, what are the things I'm going to do in order to signal that? Have you ever been to a Brazilian restaurant where it's like, yes to the meat, no to the meat?
Yes.
We've just gone to a restaurant very recently when this big collision happened, because I was like, babe, you have to stop interrupting my personal self-care time. And we just gone to this restaurant, so I was like, let's do it like the Brazilian restaurant.
Right, you flip it.
Yeah. So I was like, what can I put in my room that he can see as a signal? So it's like, my lamp. So I said, all right, babe, from now on, I'm going to put this lamp on when I'm off duty. So when you come in, if you see the lamps on, that means you can't talk to me about work. Because now it's a signal where I don't have to say anything. Because even me having to tell him is a bit of a strain.
It's tiring a little bit, yeah.
It's a bit tiring. So
it could be like after a certain time, after 6 o'clock, no more conversations when the light's on, but there's a sign that says closed for business,
But if you want to know how you have a long-lasting relationship, it may not be a work thing, it may be other things. Be so clear in your communication, own that communication, own your boundaries, own that, like reflecting, okay, if you do this, then this happens. If I say this, please, then this. And then making sure that you're the person that's going to keep repeating it. So I kept saying, okay, the light on, babe, the light on means off, I'm off, right? Yes, you know. So cut to a week later or whatever, he walks in my room, he's like, babe, sees the light on, love you, and then he turns around and walks out again. And that is how you take a potential situation that those little things, Lewis, could literally fracture our relationship.
Yeah, because if you didn't give him a sign or a signal or a boundary that he knew was actually there, he could just keep repeating the situation or the asking the question and not be aware, and you could be frustrated that he's not respecting the boundary.
Yes.
So it's got to be some type of mutually agreed upon signal, sign, time, something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's just going to keep asking you.
Yeah.
And think it's okay.
And the reassurance. So here's the thing. You said it earlier. None of us are perfect.
Yeah.
So of course, he's going to, overstep the boundary and he's not going to mean to. Right? Do I believe he doesn't mean to? The intention, of course not. But he's going to do it. So now, how do you encourage people? Or in those moments where someone's overstepped the boundary, let's say it's even a bigger boundary than that. How do you react? Do you go, hey, I told you? Or do you go, look, I so appreciate that you're trying. And last week you were amazing. You missed a step today, but don't worry. I really see that you're really trying. That really means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm. There you go. It's great.
Yeah. And now...
It's not as big a deal. Yeah.
And you're reminding them, hey, please keep trying, right? So it's like a subliminal thing. And you want to feel good about it. Like when someone's asking you to do something for them, don't you want to feel good about doing
Absolutely.
it? You don't want it to feel like an expectation. So like love language, we talk so much about love language. Mine is acts of service with Tom. And so one of the things I said, you know what would be really meaningful? You boil the kettle for me every morning. That's just a little symbol that you were thinking of me today. I don't even need to spend time with him, Lewis. We go days and days where we don't spend any time together at all. But the fact that he's boiled the kettle for me is meaningful. Now, some days I get up and he forgets. What am I going to do? Have a go at him?
Right.
That's so horrible.
Yeah.
So what I do is every time he boils it, I thank him. And every time he doesn't, I'm like, babe, thank you so much yesterday for boiling the kettle.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I forgot to do today. And I was like, it's okay.
But you're not blaming him. You're
Not at all.
acknowledging him for the work that he's putting into it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. I remember Tom talking about kids. You said early in the interview that when you were getting married, that was your mission.
Yeah.
Is that 4 kids, I think it was?
It wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say mission, just
Or part of your vision or your dream?
Yeah,
what you thought you should be doing?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, 4 kids.
Why 4 kids?
I was brought up with, it was 3 of us, and then my dad remarried and had 2, and I freaking love my siblings so much.
Wow.
And, being Greek, massive families, you're around, table of 20 people all shouting as loud as they possibly can. Like, I love family. So I was always like, 3's kind of a bit of an odd one out. There's always someone that gets left behind.
Right, there's pairs and twos, yeah.
So I don't know, it just 4 always seemed like a big thing. And
when did the moment you realized like you didn't want kids anymore? When was that moment? Because there had to be a moment where you thought, okay, we're building for this is going to happen. And he was in alignment with that, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Or was there a moment where he changed and then you decided to change as well?
So being Greek, I saw everyone get married a year later, they fall pregnant.
Right.
Like clockwork. So I didn't even think about asking myself, do I want to have kids after a year of marriage? I just assumed.
What's going to happen? Right.
And Tom was the one who was like, what are you talking about? You're like, you're 23, babe. He's like, I married you because I want to spend time with you. And so that was the first time I was like, oh.
Did you guys talk about it before marriage, about when you wanted to have kids?
Maybe, I think around then where I was like, oh, so, about a year. And he's like, well, no, like, let's move to America. Let's like really find our footing. And he's like, we're still young. So he's like, I was thinking more, 26. So it was like, we kind of kept pushing it off.
Yeah.
And so it was always going back to that when. When this happens, then we'll have kids. When we're not risking our house, then we'll have kids, right? It's always the when.
When we get our business going, then we'll have kids,
Yeah. And then as time got, progressed, I realized, I'm not getting any younger, being a female. And so that's okay. I just need to actually really look at the reality of the situation. So my biological clock is ticking, which means that I can look through so many different other ideas, right? So many women do like fertilization, like insemination, like there's so many. We can do surrogacy, I can do adoption. But if I want to have my own child naturally, then there's a ticking time. So I just started to talk to Tom about that. And then each step of the way, we just kept assessing the situation we were in. And then it got to the point where I was like, can I actually say it out loud that I don't know if I want children?
Really?
Like, I didn't know. I felt so judged. Now, judged by me. And judged by the outside world. I'd heard so many people say that, if you're not going to have children, well, you're not really maternal then, are you? So like all these challenges of like how I felt with like, well, no, I feel like I am nurturing. I feel like I am. You know, I love taking care of my husband, you know, on the weekends. And so I started to have to assess my belief system, assess why I had that belief system in the first place, and then give myself permission to challenge it. And so in the challenging of it, Tom and I sat down and we said, okay, why did we want children in the first place? Like, take all the judgment away of all the things of why you think you should, everyone else, take that away and just say, let's make a list of why we thought we were going to.
Right.
Number one, legacy. What the hell does legacy mean? Right? Like, well, I kept saying legacy, but what does that actually mean? And it's like, okay, when I'm gone, I want to be remembered. And this is just my, you know, my interpretation. And the same with Tom. Okay, well, does that mean we have to have our own blood relatives? Or can that mean be remembered for the mark that we've left on the world? Some people, that means children. Some people, it doesn't. So it's like, okay, actually, no, I don't need it to be my own children. It really is just to be, really feel like I've made a difference of me being alive on this earth. Great, now I've got that. Number two, another reason why I wanted to have children is because I really wanted to see a mini Tom running around. I don't want to deny that. Like, even now, to see a little kid with like his ears and like calling me mummy and him daddy, like, you can just see how excited I get.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I wanted children. I just, with no judgment, started to make a list. Since I was like 8 years old, I remember thinking, oh my God, the day when I feel the baby growing inside me. Put that down on the list of why you want to. Now, with no judgment, on the other side, write all the reasons why it doesn't, like, why you may not want to. I love my business. I love my relationship with my husband. I like going all in. I love my sleep. I don't want to give up, right? Like, and I don't want to give up any of these. And now, what are my choices? I can hire nannies. So then, right, so I literally just start peeling away the onion with no excuses, with no, like, just ask yourself, but what if this? And now paint the pictures. An example I give in the book very specifically is, what would an average Wednesday look like? Because I can get convinced, and I'm sure you know, so many people where it's like, I want to start a business because we see the wealth, right? The end goal. And you're like, that's going to be amazing. So I know I can convince myself to have children. I know I can say, oh my God, having a little Tom, feeling it growing inside me, not dying alone, like all these things I can convince myself of all the amazing reasons why I want to have children. But what does an average Wednesday look like on a non-so-special day where nothing exciting is going on and I love my business? How on earth am I going to be a mother and run a business? What does that look like? That's behind door number one. Behind door number two, what does life look like if I'm a stay-at-home wife and I have children? Write that out. And now what does door number three look like if I chose not to have children and all I did was work? And now I've got these 3 doors. And with zero judgment, I've done the process. I've worked out all the pros and all the cons. And now with no one else's involvement, what's the thing that lights Lisa up? And what I realized is it was exactly what I was doing. Going freaking hard for my goals, seeing how it was impacting strangers I'd never met. And it all started like with Quest. We were helping the anorexic community, the obese community. And now with like impact theory, helping people who have depression, anxiety. Someone was going to commit suicide, but they watched a piece of our content. And I'll never know their names, but I impacted them. That's what lights me on fire. And when I realized that, it was, I don't want to say an easy decision, but it was an easy decision for me and Tom to say, we're not going to have children. And then the hardship of telling everyone else and all that came with that. But,
right. When was that? How old were you?
This was probably 2015, 14-ish.
Interesting. So before then, roughly, you were still thinking, okay, I want to have kids.
Yeah.
It was in your thoughts, it was in your heart, like, we're going to do this someday, but I don't know when.
Because it was never in my mind that I could question it.
Right.
So I just kept putting it off, thinking, well, it will happen then.
Sure.
And that was like, one of the biggest things is that I write in the back is asking ourselves the hard questions. And that takes radical confidence, because a lot of the time we fear asking the hard question because we don't want to know the answer.
You know, it's interesting. A question, I've asked a lot of very successful men this question. Over the last, I don't know, many years, when I was in, let's say, challenging relationships, I would ask extremely successful, wealthy men who had been there, done that, about marriage, about kids, and if it was that actual distraction towards them impacting the world, making a lot of money, impacting the world, building something they really built. And the answer, because I kept thinking there's got to be a guy out there who's in his 50s or 60s, who's the ultimate billionaire or whatever, or created the company that's changed the world, who's done it either not married, single, or without a family, without kids. And because I was questioning it for me. And it came to the conclusion that I didn't see any happy man without a healthy relationship, like after a long term, an intimate relationship. I have yet to find a really fulfilled man without kids. Now, it's saying that there's probably not out there, but they definitely had like the partner, the female partner, the match to support them and build that relationship together on the journey towards creating the thing they were creating. And because I was challenging for a long time that I don't think I really wanted kids. I think inside of me, I didn't want kids. I was afraid of it. I thought it'd be a distraction. I thought it would be, I didn't know if I'd be a good enough dad. I was like, well, what if I'm not good enough to be their father? And what if it takes me off course of my mission? I've shifted this in the last couple of years, I think with a lot of therapy and healing and also creating a beautiful relationship with someone that I think is incredible, as opposed to someone that, people that I chose that weren't the right match for me, let's say that. For me, it's becoming clearer and clearer that I think I do want kids, And in fact, I know I want kids. I don't want to say I think anymore, but before it was a think. Before it was like, yeah, I think I want kids. But deep down, I was like, no, I don't think I do. It's been shifting a lot. And I think the more peace I've created in a relationship, I feel safer and safer to say that. But I think there's a fear of like, will I be fulfilled in 20 years, if I'd never create that. But that's just where I'm at this season of my life, so.
To your point, Tom and I spoke about that. So before I gave that analogy of like what the average Wednesday in the 3 doors, the discussion Tom and I had is, what life does he want as well, right? And so he turned to me, and I knew this already because I knew that I married an ambitious man. Right. And I always swore, I'd seen so many people get divorced in my life. And I was like, what are the things that I'm noticing? Is that a lot of people think that because you've got a ring on your finger that automatically things change.
Right.
And I know my husband's ambitious. So why on earth, just because I'm marrying him, should that change? Sure. I know that I married an ambitious man. Yeah. So when that comes to kids, what does that actually look like? So sitting with him, he was like, babe, I love you. I'll love the kids. Like if you want children, like there's a part of me that really wants it. And so he said, I'd be so on board. He's like, but let's be very clear. I'm not the person coming home at 7 p.m.
Right.
From Monday to Friday, I'm not waking up in the middle of the night.
Right.
He literally was like, even a newborn.
This is the thing I've told Martha.
Yeah.
I've told Martha, I was like, listen, I want kids, but this is going to be my mission. And I'm not just saying this and it's going to change.
Yes.
Like, you have to accept it. And she's like, I like that. That was the way my father was. We had the specific roles where he worked really, really hard. And my mom loved that about him. And we celebrated him when he came home.
Yeah.
We didn't expect something different. It didn't mean he wasn't there for us and didn't play and connect and, was engaged. So he said that to you. I'm going to be busy. I'm going to be working 120 hours a week.
Yeah. So he was like, so when we talk about having kids, he's like, if you want to do both business and have kids as well, you have to bear in mind, how I want to,
live
show up.
Yeah.
And so he was the thing. I mean, you should see him with our puppies. He's such a softie. So he was like, of course, if we have children, he's like, I want to be present for them.
Of course.
But then this is where the third question had to come up. All right. So if you're not going to be home 7 p.m. at night, having dinner, if you're not getting up in the middle of the night to, do the diaper changes and all of that, that's fine. You've been very honest. Let's lay it out before we have the children.
Right.
Don't want to find out once I've had the kids that this is your, this is how you want to be. And then what happens now, like on the weekends? And he's like, oh, well, of course I want to be a great father. I do not want to be an absent father. So, I'll make sure that I spend time with them. So then I said, where's time for me? And you have to have that discussion.
Right.
And so he was like, yeah, we need to talk about that. And then the same for me. If I'm taking care of the kids all day, and it's like, where's the time for him? And so we just said, are you okay with being bumped down on my priority list? And so we had that discussion. I said, no, I'm actually not okay. I want to be your number one. And he's like, yeah, I want to be your number one too. Is
there a world where you can be each other's number one, the kids can be happy and supported, and you can thrive in business?
And maybe. And that's very, I think everyone needs see what that actually looks like for them. But I'm so logistical.
Yeah.
Like my that's how my mind works. I'm like, well, where are the hours? But there aren't enough hours in the day. But how would you actually do that? Now, here's the thing. When I even say priority, Monday to Friday, my hours are way more prioritized between business than personal.
Sure.
Like, I don't really see Tom. Like, we kiss each other good morning, and then we like kiss each other good night, and we have business meetings during the day. Like, that's our relationship interaction. We've decided that. We've cultivated it together. We've worked on it together. So the amount of hours that go towards my business versus my personal, it's definitely business.
Sure.
But I'm so not conflicted on what is my priority that I would burn my company to the ground in a heartbeat if my husband needed me to.
Sure.
I would, if he said, hey, look, we're starting to fracture, I would immediately stop doing my interviews. I would tell my company, the people in our company, hey, I can't be present right now.
Right. You'd pause what you need to get
100%.
back on track.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my relationship is definitely my priority.
Have you seen a model of a woman who is, built a massive business or impact with their business and has a healthy marriage and has children? Have you seen a model out there, or?
I don't really know what's happening with people's marriages, right? So
Right.
I can
You
only
never
say
fully
from
know.
yes. So I can only say from the outside, and that's why
Sure.
it's like we work so hard on our relationship, so hard. It's like we work harder on that, I think, than we do our business. So I don't want to, like, I know how hard it is from our perspective and what we're looking for in our relationship.
Right.
So I don't want to judge other people. But from the outside, the person I'm like, I need to talk to her. Like, I actually need to ask her if she's really close to her husband. Sarah Blakely.
That's what I was going to say.
Like,
I know them
four
personally.
children.
No, I know them personally. I've been to their house many times. They're incredible.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that I don't know 100% of how their relationship is, but whenever I'm around them,
They look like they are.
it is, listen, they got a lot going on. When I'm at their place, they got people working there, they're building stuff, people helping cook food, they got people helping with the kids, doing homework.
Yeah.
They got a lot of things happening, a lot of activities, they're going to sports games all day, all that stuff. But it seems to me like they've figured out a model that works for them.
Yeah.
And I love being around them because that's kind of what I envision my life in the future is like they figured out a model. I hope it's all true, but I mean, they're incredible and they're so generous and kind and loving with each other. Now, I'm sure there's certain things that they've had to sacrifice here and there, but they both have thriving businesses and brands and careers that make massive impact.
Yeah.
Jesse, I feel like he's off doing what he said he was going to do. I'm going to go live these days, my life this certain way. I have these weekends where I'm gone. I have these days where I'm gone doing my adventures, running my business. Same with her. So I see the model has worked for them.
Yeah.
Which is really inspiring. Usually you see people who have family and businesses, maybe the relationship has taken a back seat. And that's not exciting to me.
Yeah. And I think that it's very powerful. And like you said, it seems like they're amazing. They're both individuals, right? Like Jesse's his own man.
Oh man,
and Sarah's her own woman.
Yes.
And so it's beautiful to see these two people who can really own their own thing, what they love to do. It seems like they go and crush it, right? And then have this beautiful family. And there's something that you said that I forgot to leave out earlier is I did process that and I decided I didn't want a nanny. That was part of my decision making because I was like, all right, well, you could easily go out and you can, have someone to look after your kids. So many women do it. No judgment. I think that's amazing. I grew up with au pairs in my house, like these, foreign people that would come and live in your house back then. And so I looked at that situation. I was like, but then I'd need someone to live in my house to help to get up in the middle of the night and help really. And I was like, that's not a lifestyle I want. And so kind of going, what's a solution? Is that a lifestyle you want? And I just was brought up with my mum was a stay-at-home mum, like for half of my life. And then she had to go to work. But when I think about how beautiful it was that my mum was standing at my school gate waiting for me.
Beautiful.
And so I just go, what mum do I actually want to be?
Right.
I didn't want to be the type of mother that felt like I was getting pulled in two different directions. And so, again, I only respect women that are making decisions that are right for them. I just knew the important thing is don't act how everyone else is doing it.
Do it the way you want to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, and I think what Sarah did, which is the reason why it worked for them, is I think she took a pause from being the CEO of Spanx for, I think, 5-6 years, I think.
Oh, I didn't realize.
I'm sure she was still involved in certain ways, but it was probably pulled back way back. I'll have to ask her to get the facts straight, but I think she took a number of years off from CEO, put in someone, but the business had grown to a large business that time that the momentum was building kind of on its own. She didn't need to work harder and harder for it to keep growing and impacting more women at that stage. And so I think it allowed for her to be there more committed to the kids at the early years to now to having more flexibility. They're off to school, so she has time to work during the day, and I think she just sold the company anyways. So I think that is what the structure worked for them, but I'm sure it comes with its challenges too. So.
And that's the thing, I think everything does come with a challenge, right? So really
having kids, not having kids, building a business, not building a business.
Yeah, like where do you want to put your effort? And it was actually, who was it? Someone was on an Impact Theory Tom show, and someone had said that it stuck with me forever, I mean years. But he went to therapy for his relationship. And he said, and the therapist said to him...
Was this me on the show?
It may have been. I don't think it was. But, it hit me so hard. It was like, all right, you went to a therapist to talk about your relationship. Is your goal to have a successful relationship in life? And they were like, yes. It's like, okay, if you can embrace, all relationships are going to be hard. All relationships are going to take a lot of energy. So now the question needs to be, is this the person that is worth that energy? Because, right, it's like if you want a healthy relationship, just embrace, it's going to take work. Great. Now, if you're seeking therapy or any issue with a partner, with a spouse, whether it's kids, whether it's work, just decide, is this where it's worth me putting the energy to try and make it work? There's no guarantee, but is this what I'm trying to do? And so for me, it really was, where do I want to put my energy? Where is it going to fulfill me? Right. And start strip away all the assumptions and comparisons of other women.
Of course. A lot of people do things based on being judged, whether they do it or not. It's like, I think I'm supposed to do this thing. I felt that for a long time. Like, okay, I'm supposed to be married by this time. You know, I'm 39, I'm not married yet, you know, I don't have kids yet. I think I felt the judgment as well. But I kept going back into, is this something that I want to do? Is this something that serves me and my mission? And up until now, it didn't. You know, so I'm curious, what would life be like if you did have a child or two?
I mean, I'd freaking love it. Like, there's still that massive part of me. I'm very deliberate in, like, I've gotten good at being very deliberate. So when something doesn't serve me, I look at it and go, oh, well, how could this serve me? I try to always think, so if I had the kid right now, literally if you threw a baby at me and you were like, all right, Lisa, you're going to be a parent, I'd be like, all right, how's this the most amazing thing? How can I shift my mindset? What do I need to do to like really pour my heart and soul into this little fluffy thing? You know, not fluffy thing, because like I've got a puppy.
This human, yes.
Right, so I really would go, okay, now how do I shift what I'm doing, my perspective, the way that I think, and make this the most amazing thing that has just come to me.
Right.
So I think I would embrace it. I would, you know, look at all the amazing opportunities that having a child would give me. And then I would navigate. And I don't judge myself for failing at things, for messing up. So even with parenting, it's like, oh my God, the pressure people must get on how to parent. Like everyone's willing to judge, oh, you do this, you feed them that. It's like, oh my God. It would be dizzying.
You have a plastic bottle? You don't have a biodegradable? Yeah, something. Some judgment everywhere, right?
Exactly. So like, again, I would almost process the judgment before I did it in order to make sure that I'm going in with my eyes wide open, that I'm the learner, that I would figure things out, that, you know, and actually this is one thing that I talk about in the book that was hit me so hard. How many people are so scared to start something new that we know, right? Like new business, because they're so worried about judgment.
So many.
So many. I don't want to be gender specific, but I've at least found it's more women as well that are very fearful about like going into something new, starting a new business. So now the question is, I want to ask you, Lewis, how many women have turned around and said, hey, I'm pregnant for the first time. And someone turned around and was like, you don't know how to have a baby. What do you mean you're going to have a baby? But you've never had a baby before. No one would ever say that. In a million years, no one would ever say, but you've never had a baby before, so why on earth are you having a baby? But yet, we fear trying anything else new if it's not something that is just society perceives as normal. So, oh my God, you're going to start in a business, but what about this? But you've got no experience, but you don't know how to. But now, if I was to say I was pregnant, what would you, oh my God, you're going to be great. You'll figure it out. Don't worry. I learned along the way. I read a couple of books.
Right.
But we don't do that with business. So that's a really powerful mindset on how I shift things on what I'm doing. How do I rethink things in order to keep going forward?
That's powerful. That's really powerful. I think it's interesting. Well, I think that, I guess someone might say, well, that's, biology, the nature tells you you're going to figure it out, whereas maybe a business is something that we weren't maybe designed to do, I guess, biologically. But I think it's interesting if you have something inside of you, an idea inside of you, a seed, and bringing it to life as into a business can be the same thing as bringing a child into life. It's an idea, a seed, a thought that you want to create. So it's a creation either way.
Yeah. Yes. And look, I'm all for biology. I think that's very powerful. But there are those moments, right? Those intuitions. Like when you have a baby, there's like the woman's intuition. Like we're giving so many things in order to be able to protect the baby. And yet with business, like I have learned to start to listen to my intuition just the same. It's like, I think intuition has to be trained. Right. I don't think it's just like, oh, you got intuition, it's fine. You're amazing. You know everything. It's like, no, we learn intuition as we get older. That look, that one time, that one person gave me a look, ended bad. Your body remembers.
Feel it, yeah, of course.
So,
what would you say is the biggest insecurity or fear you still are faced with today?
Really starting anything new. I mean, that's never, even writing this book. It's like, I don't know how to write a book. And even getting interviewed, right? It's like, I don't know how to be interviewed about a book. So it's not so much insecurity now in the sense of it. I don't feel petrified, but like, I know I'm not equipped. And so is that an insecurity? Sure, but it's a valid insecurity because I've never done a book before. So anytime I fear that, like that fear of like, oh, you're about to enter a space that you don't know, I just reassure myself. It's like, oh, it's day one. It's day one. Give yourself the grace to know anything you try is day one. We do it at college, right? I bet you did it at practice. Like the first time you picked up a football, you weren't thinking that you were going to be the best quarterback in the world, right? It's like, oh, I've got to learn how to freaking throw the ball. So that's what I do. Just day one, anytime I feel the fear over anything new, Lewis, anything, I have these mantras, I have these tactics, I have these tools. Everything I put in the book, it's like, okay, Lisa, you've got radical confidence. And radical confidence means that even with the fear, you're going to move forward, but you need to practice. You have to go in with a mindset that you're going to learn and have a game plan. And then when you fall on your face, get back up. Like that is my superpower. I wish I could be amazing at things, but I'm not. So I remind myself my superpower is I'm the person that gets back up.
Yeah.
And that's encouraging.
That's beautiful. And what about around money? How has your mindset shifted? Do you feel like you have created more confidence or more self-love or more belief in yourself as the money started to come for both you and Tom in your life, where you really didn't have a lot beforehand? You had some, you were working or he was working, but it wasn't like the amount of wealth that you guys created with Quest and Impact Theory and everything you guys have built together. How did the accumulation of wealth change your beliefs about yourself?
Oh, that's such a big question. That's such a good question, Lewis. Okay.
Because you went from an apartment, I'm assuming, to a house, to a bigger house, to number in your bank account going way up, to being able to buy things now, lots of great things.
Yeah.
How did that shift?
So I really thought, when we're successful, when we're rich, I'm going to feel like everything's going to be okay. Because you look at successful, wealthy people and you're like, at least for me, can't speak for other people, I admire them. Like, oh my God, look at that watch. Like, look at that thing, right? Like, oh my God. I'm going to feel great when I have it. So because you think that about that person, you think that's how you're going to feel when you get there. So I'm going to take you back. Quest is announced as $1 billion company, but we all know until you actually make any sales,
you don't make any money.
You literally don't make any money.
You're just getting a salary and some bonuses.
Yeah. Tom and I were still sharing the same Ford Focus with a hole in the exhaust when Quest was announced as $1 billion company. So everyone thinks you're wealthy, but we literally had, Tom's salary and that was it. So we go to sell a very small portion of Quest. And so these things take months and months and months.
How much did you guys, what was the percentage?
I think it was like 9% at the beginning.
That you guys had total?
That we sold. So
gotcha.
So there's 3 business partners, Tom and then the other.
So they split it 3 ways, essentially.
Yes, exactly. So we split like 9% or something, like 11%. I can't remember how much. This was a while ago. So it's a small percent, so you're still taking massive ownership over it, but it was still a hell of a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So now that sort of thing takes months and months and months. So we didn't want to talk about it. We didn't tell anybody that we were trying to sell a bit because you never know what's going to happen. So one day we hear rumors that today is going to be the day.
that the money comes in.
Yes.
Like there's a wire
So
transfer
literally,
of this much money.
Yes, our Ford Focus is still sitting in the drive.
Right.
And we hear these rumors from our finances that the money's about to come in. So we're working in our makeshift garage gym. And in between reps, Tom's like, all right, babe, refresh. No, nothing yet.
Oh,
so we're like
man.
going deep, refresh. And literally one button, refresh, boom, your life changes.
Wow.
And in that moment, I was like, oh my God. And so we hugged, we took a couple of selfies. And then what did we do, Lewis? We got back up and went back to work.
Yeah.
And in that moment, because first of all, I was like, babe, where are you going? Yeah, we're going to celebrate. He goes, we've got to get back to work. Our mission isn't done. And I was like, you're right. And in that moment, it was such a beautiful realization. Because we had a mission, so we were chasing money. We said, stop chasing money. Now let's chase something that's actually predicated on passion, desire, and value add. That was Quest Nutrition. So we flipped our mindsets. We stopped chasing money. And in the effort of stop chasing money, it led to us creating money. But because we'd already developed a mission, we'd already developed our why, we knew why we were getting out of bed every day, that didn't change just because our bank account did. Now look, I'm not going to pretend. It was amazing, right? We didn't tell anybody, and about 2 days later or something, we went shopping.
Yeah.
And it was like...
Get whatever you want, yes.
So it was like, that's amazing. I'm never going to BS anyone. It was a dream come true. It was wonderful. But it didn't change how I felt about myself. It didn't change my mission.
Did you believe you were deserving and worthy of the money?
I don't really think like that. I don't really know what that means, because when it says deserving, there are people out there that have a harder life than I do, that work harder to provide for their family than I do. So it's hard for me to say deserve. We work freaking hard for it. We sacrificed. So do I think that it was, well placed maybe? Sure. It's hard for me to kind of answer that. It really did become when you get what you think you want, when you go to bed at night, how do you feel about yourself? And it was the same. It was just in more expensive bed sheets.
Right.
And
the nicer car. And,
The negative voice is still there. The person saying that you're not good is still there. The imposter syndrome is still there. It's just in a nicer house.
So you still felt like an imposter?
Oh my God, of course. Yeah.
What was the imposter voice?
I still felt like I was helping my husband out.
What year was this?
2015.
Okay, so about 7 years ago.
Yeah. So
what was the voice in your head at that time? When this massive number hits the bank account, what is that imposter voice saying to you?
Even though at this point I had, I was had 40 employees underneath me, 10,000 square foot, literally went from shipping bars on my living room floor to that. And then imposter syndrome is that my husband and his business partners earned the money, and I was a good help.
So that's what you were saying to yourself. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so even that took work and, internal work and, what value do you bring to the table just because your name is on that piece of paper as a founder, because those three were, it's like you've brought, to really coach myself through, but you've sacrificed, you've given every hour of every day. Literally, I was working 12, 13 hours a day. So to really believe in myself that I had earned that was very hard, but it was important for me to do. And then the idea of in the grind, when things are hard and you're asking yourself, what the hell are we doing this all for? Like, why? Tom and I would drive around Beverly Hills in our crappy car, and we would point out all the houses we would buy. And we were like, I like this style. No, I like this style. And then eventually the money comes to our account and we actually can buy the house that we're the roads that we're touring. So it's like the biggest dream come true. And in that moment, it was I wanted a waterfall. So I'm a 90s chick. I love hip hop and I love 90s. And so I was always joking, but really serious. I was like, babe, I want to do our own version of a 90s hip hop music video. I want a waterfall. I want Dom Perignon bottle. I want to pour it down me in a sexy outfit. I want you to film me. That was the dream. I have to emotionally tie to a dream. It can't just be a house. It has to be the feeling of getting the house. So I had this vision. We finally get the house. It finally has a freaking waterfall, dude. We get the keys. We got a bottle of Dom Perignon. Tom's got a photo. He's taking a photo of me. I'm taking a swig of the champagne. And that was the moment my health and my gut felt like it, obviously I've had health issues. That was the moment.
Really?
That same moment that we were celebrating the biggest achievement of our lives.
Really?
It's so cliche.
Why was that the moment, do you think?
So I think I'd had 15 years of gut issues. I was ignoring them. I was priding myself on the grind. I wasn't priding myself on the self-care. So for years and years, I was getting sicker and sicker because I wasn't replenishing my gut. I had a very unhealthy relationship with food. So I wasn't having fat. I wasn't eating carbs. I thought I had to be as skinny as possible. So all this unhealthy relationship, I was getting sick because I was working a lot. I wasn't replenishing. And so I was getting a lot of antibiotics. And so for like years and years and years, I was taking 3 to 4, 5 times a year antibiotics.
Wow.
And I really think it got to the point where I'd pushed myself into the ground, and the bubbly and the alcohol, I think it was just that moment.
Wow.
And I think, and it literally, from that, it felt like it erupted. I didn't tell Tom because, of course, I'm trying to be strong.
Sure.
So I'm like, babe, I'll be back in a second. I run to the bathroom, and I literally cannot get, I'm like, what the hell is happening to me? My gut is in like such disarray. But my husband's so excited for, so of course, what do I tell myself? Just push through it.
Right.
Don't tell him, push through it. It's a celebration. And I was like, all right, if I just get straight into the swimming pool, then I'll be able to hide my pain.
Oh, man.
So I get out, I'm like trying to pretend, I'm like rushing into the swimming pool, and just the water pressure was too unbearable.
Ooh.
And that's when I'm like, babe, I don't know what's wrong. That was 6 years ago. Wow. 6 years ago. I'm still on my journey of healing my gut.
Wow.
Just to give perspective to everybody.
Wow.
For a whole year, I couldn't eat more than like 4 or 5 ingredients. It was like beef, salt, coconut oil, and chicken. I was 20 pounds lighter than I am now.
Wow.
My hair was falling out. My nails were brittle. And you want to talk about my relationship with my husband. I started feeling like I wasn't sexy. I could barely hug him, let alone any intimacy. You got to understand what that does to a woman's emotions, how I felt about myself. Tom was so supportive.
Wow.
But I felt like I wasn't bringing, beauty to our relationship. That was me, that wasn't him. Sex was out the window. And it was like I couldn't even stand up at 5 minutes at a time. And on the outside, we had like just literally were celebrating Quest being $1 billion company and one of the most fastest growing nutrition companies in the world. And here I am. I can't even eat. I pretended I didn't tell anybody. For months, I didn't tell anyone. So sorry, I know that was a long story, but really going back to your point of, I remember the day that my success changed. And that was the most beautiful lesson if I can look back, right? Like, I think it was Tony Robbins, but I use this all the time. How can I make the most horrific thing be the best thing that's ever happened to me?
Yeah.
In that moment, I was tested.
Giving it meaning, yeah.
Yeah. And in that moment, I was tested. And it was like, you can't, like I said, I'm still struggling 6 years later. But how can that moment be the best thing that's ever happened to me? Number one, I took ownership. I did it to my gut. I was the one that had a bad relationship with food. I was the one that was taking the antibiotics. And for so long, I was like, it's the doctor's fault. It's the expert's fault. It's that person's fault. Taking ownership over my health changed everything, not just for my health, but in the way that I see business, in the way that I see my relationship. Now, every time something goes wrong, the very first thing I ask myself is, how can I take ownership over this? How was this my own doing? So that changed my whole health. That changed my business. Every time now something goes wrong in the business, whether it's an employee that has royally screwed up, I literally will, before I say anything, it's like, what's my ownership in this?
Yeah. I know that feeling.
And so that just changed everything. And then it also changed my idea of success. It really did. And so when thank God, like, I don't know how I would think about success if that hadn't happened to me. I don't know how I would think about money if that didn't happen to me.
How do you think about it now?
I don't give a shit. Like, I love it, of course. It allows me to create content, right? It allows me to impact people. It allows me to do all the things that I do every day. If ever I was coming into conflict with my relationship, I wouldn't think twice about it. If ever it was coming to conflict of me feeling good about myself, I wouldn't think about it. Like, that's what I mean by it doesn't dictate who I am and how I show up every day. It is an amazing facilitator. Amazing. And I'm such an advocate for wealth creation. I think it's BS. People are like, no, it can do beautiful things. It really can. So I'm not going to BS anyone. But money in and of itself is like a superpower. You can use it for good or you can use it for evil. It's your choice.
Right.
And so for me, it's like it's so beautiful because I'm able to create beautiful things out of it. but it doesn't have a reflection of how I feel about myself, who I am, and how I show up every day. And I don't know if it would have. It may have done that if my gut didn't fall apart.
Interesting. I'm never a fan of changing the past, but let's say you could hypothetically give yourself 3 lessons that you learned from the day you got married until now. And hypothetically, you could speak to yourself a week before you got married.
Yeah.
From this standpoint to 20 years ago, I guess it was, when you're 20-something years ago, when it was your 20th year anniversary. And you could say whatever lessons that you wanted to share, 3 things that you just wish you had the skills around, the tools around, or you wish you had the hindsight then to think about. What would you say to your younger self right before you got married, going in those next 8 years before this started the transition?
Ooh. I don't think I would change anything. And I don't know if that's a cop-out because I can't change anything, or, in fact, no, I don't think it's a cop-out. I think I use it as a way for my mind to stay strong, because I need to believe I am who I am today because of everything that's happened.
Of course.
And so even going back then, I think the thing is just like, it's okay. Like I got in my head so much when I was younger of like, can I be perfect? How can I be the best wife? How can I make sure that I am, that I'm bringing value to people's lives? Like I put so much pressure on myself of always being like the perfect person. And if something goes wrong, it's a reflection of who I am. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned is when failure happens or something goes wrong, it actually is a reflection of who you are, but not in the way that we think it is. I used to think failure was a reflection of how bad I was at things. And I don't want people to see it. But now I think failure is a reflection of the fact that I'm willing to go after something.
I like that.
And so I think I would go back and tell myself that. Number one, every time you fail or you fall on your face, just know it's a reflection that you're trying to do something in your life. Also that you're a work in progress, always and forever. Even, who you see today, in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, I want to be growing. So even like I shared that story earlier about, I wanted 4 children. Mm-hmm. I've accepted this is my life. Mm-hmm. And that who I say I am today may not be who I am next year. Right. And that's okay.
Because it changed then, it could change again.
Of course.
Right.
And even that with my husband, right, with Tom, it's like, yes, he's an extremely ambitious man. But what if tomorrow he decided he didn't want to be ambitious anymore? Like I would 100% accept that. We would have to navigate what that means, what change that makes to our lives. But we encourage each other to change, to evolve, to adapt. And going back to your question, when I was younger, I never would have. I'd be like, no, everything has to stay the same. Because everyone finds comfort in the same. Everyone finds comfort in the known. And so I've now completely pivoted and the complete opposite. And now I seek challenges. I seek things that I don't know what I'm doing.
What would you say is the biggest thing you still are working on healing?
Oh, healing.
I'm a big believer that healing is a journey. It's a process. You might have a moment where you're like, this thing has been affecting me for decades and now I'm awake to it and I'm starting the healing journey and now I'm not as triggered by this thing anymore, but there might be tendencies every now and then, just not as big of a trigger or a wound. What do you feel the wound is for you?
Yeah, I know it very well. It's a trigger of mine that I didn't realize I've been working through. Realized it probably a few years ago now. Tom highlighted it for me, and it's interesting. Have a conversation with your partner about what triggers you when they notice it first. That's freaking hard, dude. Because initially you're just like, no, what do you mean? I'm not triggered by that, right? because you get triggered by it.
Of course.
So first of all, I just look, okay, Tom wants what's best for me. So I have to just embrace that I've been with him long enough to know when he's saying something, I really need to pay attention. And then identifying where the trigger comes from. So there's actually a couple. Number one, I don't cry.
Ever?
Not in public and very rarely by myself.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm working to unwind that. And it started off with me joking and Tom joking that I was dead inside. And we used to joke.
But there's some truth in jokes, right?
So, because here was the thing. Because there would be moments, literally, we'd be watching a movie, Lewis, and he'd be in tears. And he'd look over and he's like, what the fuck, babe? You're not even crying? And I'm like, no. Like, it's sad.
Sad, but yeah.
And so I think that part of it was like a defense mechanism for him to be like, you're just dead inside. And So I used to
Right.
joke, yeah, I'm dead inside. It never bothered me until I started to realize, why don't I cry? What is it? Like, I see so many women hold back the tears so much, and I'm the complete opposite. I try to do it with no judgment, right? But like,
You mean by yourself or
by
around
myself,
people? Or,
yeah.
okay.
So by myself, like after I started to realize, why am I the only one that doesn't cry in movies?
When did you start realizing this?
When I was younger, I used it as a source of pride.
I'm strong, I'm tough.
Yeah, like I'm freaking cry. What's going on over here? Like, I don't freaking cry. And I used it as a pride thing. As I learned more and more about mindset, as I started to learn about my audience, doing my show, Women of Impact, and hearing how many people would watch episodes and be in tears, and I'm like, well, geez, like, what am I not feeling? Am I actually dead inside? So I had to process, and I was like, is this holding me back? Why is this holding me back? Like, why is this bothering me right now? To your point, like, why is this now bothering me? Before I used to think of it as a superpower. And so as I started to unravel, I started to just, no judgment, go back into my past. And I realized that when I was around 15, I was at a funeral. First person that really died in my family. And I looked around, and I'm the youngest, so I was very much used to everyone else being the strong people, the leaders and all of that, and I would just follow. I look around, everyone's in tears. Everyone. All the guys, all the women. And in that moment, I was like, well, who's going to be strong for them? I remember, and I was like, I'm so used to people being strong for me, but there's not a dry eye in the room. So I guess I'm going to have to be it. And so I remember being, hold back the tears, Lee, don't you dare cry. Be strong for everyone else. And then I also remember at the age of around 7 or 8, I remember my parents got divorced, and I would walk into the room, and my mum would always wipe away her tears and pretend she wasn't crying. And like now, even when my mum hears me say that, I'm like, Mum, you cannot blame yourself.
Sure.
Please don't. Because of course, you try not to upset me. So why would you, like, don't feel bad about trying to wipe away the tears. And we learn so much about mindset now, you know, over the years. So don't worry about it. But yeah, that did teach me that as a woman, you shouldn't show tears or vulnerability in front of others because it may upset them.
Interesting.
And so I think I adopted those things. So flash forward, I'm now an adult. My husband's crying more than I am, and I'm like, I really have to assess it. So I'm really still processing it.
Really?
Yeah.
How are you processing it?
In moments of, so my puppy passed away a couple of weeks ago. And when I say puppy, 17 and a half, he wasn't a puppy at all. And in moments like that, I was just like, okay. Like, well, first of all, I couldn't even control myself. It was just, the tears and the heartbreak just came. So in moments like that, I'm like, let it go. Like, I was coaching myself.
Really?
To just like feel the feel. And I was repeating that, feel the feel, Lisa. It's okay, feel the feel. So I kept telling myself that.
Were you trying to hold it back a little bit, or?
I think once upon a time I would have, but I've done the pre-work now. In just over the last few years, I've really been working on this specific thing.
Wow.
So in that moment, and then the last thing was give myself grace. So I was supposed to do Jay Shetty's podcast that day. And I was like, it's freaking Jay Shetty. Like, you know, we all know how busy he is, right? And he's a good friend of ours, but I know how busy he is. And
It's like the universe testing you. It's like, okay, you got to just toughen up and go back to work. And
yeah. And so in that moment, I was like, no, I'm not going to toughen up. No. You know what? I need to feel this. And this is exactly why you can't cry, Lisa. Because you're trying to be a badass all the time. But I have to tell myself. So I have to literally say to myself, Lisa, be soft. Let yourself feel the feelings. You know, if you went to this, you would put on your uniform, you would get your mindset right, but then that won't allow you to actually grieve. And so, you know, very graciously called him and we cancelled the shoot. And I told my team, I kept my phone off. And that was the thing. I was like, I need to allow myself the space to process my emotions, and I just need to cry, and I just need to do whatever I need to do. And so I gave myself that space. And so that was all because I'd done the work. I realized that it was a problem. I realized that, oh my God, this might be a point. My old habits are going to arise. So now I have to give myself the space.
What do you think is available for yourself when you allow yourself space to feel emotions, to process emotions in healthy manners, as opposed to holding back emotions?
I think that might have been a big part of why I ended up having a lot of health issues.
Really?
Because if you think about it, I was grinding at Quest.
Wow.
I never gave myself any self-care. It was like my auntie, I remember, this is heartbreaking, I remember I was in the middle of work, my auntie in Cyprus going to a massive, she was walking in the street and a car hit her and pinned her against these barriers. And I remember my dad calling me and me being on the phone. I was talking with him, and I was like, well, I can't go to Cyprus. I've got business to run. Keep me updated, Dad, but I can't, and it's like, now you kidding? I would drop everything if someone needed me, and I'd so things like that where you just make these small decisions where you're like, well, it's all the way there in a way, what can I really do? And then I go back to work. I didn't actually let the emotion of what had happened to my aunt sink in. I didn't let any of that. And so I've kind of trying to unwind all the behavior that I've done in order to see how I can use it in the future. And what's interesting is, because I'm so used to, I said earlier about music, I'm so used to knowing how to get hard and how to get on. On that day when my dog died, the next day, I actually realized I had to let it out. Even if I wasn't feeling it, I had to let it out. And so I was like, what can I do to let it out?
Because you've never really done it before. No. You didn't know how to.
Yeah. So I actually put on a song that I knew was going to break my heart.
Which one was this?
It was a very recent one, which is weird because I'd only just heard it.
A newer song, yeah.
It's the Jennifer Lopez song, On My Way to You.
Okay.
Or whatever.
Okay.
God, even now I could get actually a little emotional because I was listening to that song as I were in the car on the way to the vet.
Oh.
So we get a call at 1 a.m, hey, we don't know if he's going to make it, you got to get your ass here. And we jump in the car, and then the next day I heard that song, and it's basically, I'm on my way to you. It's even talking about it I'm getting emotional, but if I put that song on, I did it deliberately. I put it on repeat. I wanted the tears to come. I wanted the floodgates open on purpose. And so that's kind of going back to what I'd said earlier. It's I try to be deliberate about what I'm trying to achieve in order to allow the emotion to come so that I can really just feel it. Whether it's, hey, I want to be freaking bad right now, and how the hell do I get on stage and be bad? And right now, I need to let this out. How do I do that? What do I do? I put on my most intimate, soft pajamas. I had a photo of him next to me. I had his blanket. And so literally, I was smelling his blanket, putting that song on, and wanting to cry.
I can relate to the music being an opener for you. My father passed 2 months ago, and for the first few weeks afterwards, I was just listening to music. There'd be songs, an Andrea Bocelli song will play even now, and it gets me very emotional to the point where I need to turn the song off because it'll take me down a grieving path for a period of time. So if I'm at night and it's at a home and I can do it, then that's great. But if it's in the middle of the day, I'm I have to block it at some points to stay focused on something. But it's a journey. But I'm so proud of you for allowing yourself the process of healing. It's a journey. And for me, it's a journey as well. But I think allowing yourself to cry or just feel the emotions, how you want to feel them, and let that out of you. Because whatever is inside of you stays trapped there, it might affect you physically. Yeah. So I think that's a really healthy thing. You're allowing yourself the ritual of processing. Because I truly believe the body keeps score, from the book. Body keeps the score. So if we're not able to process in healthy ways, then it's going to block us up in certain ways.
Yeah, it was so weird and so freaking heartbreaking, and something new that I'm working on.
Because I know you're extremely mentally tough, right? You and Tom talk about mindset all the time. This is a part of the pillar of your values and foundation and growth mindset. Have you processed or thought about the power of emotional agility?
Yeah.
And that value for yourself? And have you looked into that? Yeah.
That's really why I knew that this wasn't healthy. Even if it was well, why does it matter, Lisa? Right? Why does it matter that you don't cry? Because I know it doesn't actually help what I'm trying to do on impact and relatability and understanding, in empathy, all of that. I recognize it. So,
are you doing any more coaching or getting other support for this?
No, it's interesting because I have a process that I do, and it's very internal. It's very I almost don't want other people to give me advice.
Sure.
I almost don't, because it becomes overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I often go, be at peace with yourself and just listen to your own mind and be like, okay, well, why doesn't this sit well? What can you do? Like, so going through these last 2 weeks of embracing like my emotions up and down and not knowing, it's like I was walking up the stairs the other day, literally, and something happened, and all of a sudden I got this wave. I don't know if you know how that feels, obviously with your dad, like that wave. And I was walking up the stairs and I got this wave of just freaking grief, and I was like, oh, and I literally had to take a deep breath, and I had to like put my hand on my heart and just be like, fuck, what's happening to me right now? And I'd be like, it's okay. Like even now I'm getting emotional because it's like that feeling of like, and see, I would never do this. I would never get emotional if I hadn't done all this work. And so right now you see me in real time being able to evolve and go, wow, just putting my hand on my heart and reminding me that it's okay, like to be able to take that gasp of air where you can't believe, that you can't breathe. It's okay.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I think another thing, someone we both admire, Sarah Blakely, I've seen her be vulnerable and cry and open up, in different settings, and it's like, you can be a powerful woman and build something very meaningful and impactful and also be emotionally, agile, I say, and allow yourself to process. So not saying you need to cry all the time or anything like that, but I think it's powerful to be aware of it and be on that healing journey. So
yeah, I mean, it's like your book, the last one you wrote, is so amazing. I mean, it's going to the point that, you have to always be tough, and you always say, people expect this of you, but what about the beauty that is emotion within a man?
Absolutely.
And then how do we embrace the two? And so for me, it's the same, right? It's that like, I've trained myself to be mentally strong for so long that I have to give myself the permission to be this soft, beautiful, warm-hearted person and be able to be a freaking beast and crush it at work and have these dualities. And I think growing up for both of us, it was like we weren't allowed the space to have the dualities.
Yeah, it was just one.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're on the journey. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
You.
And I like you tough and soft.
Thanks.
I like you cuddly and strong. So, and I think that makes someone even more unique in the world. Matthew Hussey talks about this in terms of relationship, where he's coaching women saying, it's the person who's also smart and a little edgy, who's vulnerable and can be tough. It's not when you're vulnerable all the time or tough all the time where someone creates long-term, like amazing attraction or abundance. It's like having the duality. I think you talked about it in your show as well. So I'm so happy you're doing that. This is a question I ask everyone towards the end. It's called the 3 truths. So I'd like you to imagine a hypothetical scenario. It's your last day on earth many years away from now. You get to accomplish everything you want to accomplish, but you've lived a happy, healthy life. And for whatever reason, everything you've created's got to go with you or to another place. So no one has access to your book, movies, work, content anymore, but you get to leave behind 3 things you know to be true, 3 lessons. What do you feel like your future self would leave behind as those 3 truths?
Oh, confidence isn't the start to something. Confidence is the result of something. Number 2, failure is the most amazing opportunity, and if you don't respect yourself, then no one else will. I don't actually know where that last one came from. That was actually a surprise to me too.
That's good. I believe that. If you don't have self-love, self-respect, then people are going to walk all over you. It's a powerful book. I'm really excited about this. Radical Confidence, 10 no BS lessons on becoming the hero of your own life. A lot of inspiring people have endorsed this. I've gone through it. I love the content, love the practical tips at the end of the chapters, really inspiring stories about your lessons of things you've talked about here, building Quest, other things behind the scenes, which I think is really cool, and where you're at now. So make sure you guys pick up a copy or 2, give them to a few friends as well. Women of Impact, it's a powerful channel on YouTube, your Instagram, your social media is really inspiring, powerful. People can follow you there, lots of great content. RadicalConfidence.com for this. So you guys can go here, or Lisa Bilyeu on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. How else can we be of support to you right now?
I think it really is just, I'm all about value add. So if the book brought value, if this interview brought value, share, tag, like that's really the biggest thing, is that, I just always think that none of us can create global impact alone. Ever. And so I'm always like, what's my thing? So my thing is, if I can throw a pebble in the water and then it becomes this ripple that eventually creates a tsunami, my job is done. So if I think of the book my content as being the pebble. And if other people can go out and create those ripples, like that would be so meaningful.
I love that. I love that. Well, Lisa, I want to acknowledge you for a moment for your journey. I think it's inspiring to see someone who set out in their life with a certain path and continues to evolve that path. And I acknowledge you for learning to love yourself and not shame yourself and not hold yourself back for shifting and evolving and innovating yourself from what you thought you were supposed to be to society's standards or maybe family's pressures or even husband's pressures, and evolving to going from that scale of a 1 to 10 from a 1 to where you are now, which seems like it's a lot higher, and I'm assuming will always be evolving. So I really acknowledge you for leading by example.
Thank you.
By talking about how, you don't just become confident when you have a result, it's the confidence at the act of failure, building yourself up where confidence comes from. So I think it's really inspiring that you're sharing this, that you've been building everything you've been building, and I'm so happy for you. So grateful for you. Yes.
Thank you for motivating me as well. You and just all of our friends, like my first time writing a book, and so having people to support you,
yes.
is so freaking meaningful. And you always said, Lewis, you got a book, you can come on. I was like, oh my God, I'm coming on Lewis' house. I have a book.
Yes, yeah. Well, you asked to come on, I think it was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel like it was the right timing. I wanted to be like, when you have your book, let's do something so there's a moment so we can make a bigger impact with that message.
Can we take a minute to talk about this?
Sure.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
So as a friend, you motivated me. And it's like when people say no, it doesn't mean it's a reflection of how bad you are. Or maybe sometimes it is a reflection of how bad. Great, I can get better. And that's the thing, is that how do I bring value to your audience? If I'm not there yet, Lewis, I wouldn't want you to have me on.
Yeah.
I like the motivation of, how do I get so good that I gotta be on Lewis's show? That's about me, that's not a you thing.
Right.
How do I get so good? One of my favorite phrases, Steve Martin, the comedian, be so good they cannot ignore you.
Right.
And it's the most empowering thing ever. And so for you, I've seen the guests you've brought on. You are an incredible human. And so to motivate me to be like, you got a book, you can come on. It has to be the right time.
Right.
It was a blessing. And I want people to really hear that, because in moments where you reach out to somebody, so first of all, have the courage to reach out.
Yes.
Because if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. So now, if you do ask and you get a no, ask yourself, is it a me thing? Is it a them thing? Or is it a not yet thing?
Right.
Because here's the thing, I just may never be right for your show and your audience. Okay, well, no matter how good I get, if I'm not right, I'm not right. And now I may take that as an insult to me, but it's actually not. So now look at what are the things, is it a not yet? And so that was it. It's a not yet. Great. What do I have to do? What skill sets do I have to learn?
Yeah.
What do I have to build? Because here's the thing, I don't want success given to me. I don't want it given to me. And that's why I said with the book, if the book brings value, then share it.
Sure.
That's my thing. So it's for me to be on here, for you to really think that I can bring value, that's a me thing. I've got to bring my A game. And I love that.
Yeah.
So it was so powerful that you said that to me. And I want people to think of that, moments like that. How can you not take it personally? How can you say their response is actually motivating to me? Take our friend Jamie Kern-Lima. How many no's did she get all along the way she was trying to start her makeup company? So many no's. If she had let a no stop her, she wouldn't have built a company worth $1.2 billion, and she wouldn't have sold it to L'Oreal, and she wouldn't have been the first female CEO in L'Oreal's history. If she took no as a reflection of her worth.
Wow.
So that was my leaving
Powerful.
part. Do not take no.
It's powerful. I think it's exciting. And I think we should always, if we want something bad enough, or not saying you want to diss, but if you want something in general life bad enough.
I wanted this bad enough, Lewis.
Well, you're here. But if you want something in life bad enough, so you want to go whatever on the Today Show. The Today Show's not, you got to think about what does their audience want, and are you at the level of where they want you to be able to promote someone like you? Or is the timing off? Or is it not the right season for them because they're in the news cycle of the war and they're not talking about something else? So can't take things personally. You just got to think, how can I build myself better?
Yes.
How can I improve, or how can I grow and set myself up for the mission I'm on, and then allow other people to talk about it when is ready. So really excited for you, Radical Confidence. Make sure you guys pick up a few copies, share them with your friends. Leave some comments below if you're on YouTube right now. Tag Lisa when you're over on social media as well, of course, and follow her all over the place on social media. Final question for you. What's your definition of greatness?
Saying I'm going to get somewhere and do something and then actually doing it. So this question is very appropriate for me being here because I said, I'm going to get on the Lewis House show. He will say yes to me one day. He will say yes to me. I'm going to be so great. He cannot ignore me. And here I am. So I think that the definition of greatness is saying you want something, asking yourself, how am I going to get it? And be willing to put in the work and practice. My favorite movie, Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. And just keep practicing until you get so good that you can't be ignored.
Lisa Bilyeu, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Miracles!
Powerful.
The thought process is if you're gonna lie about this, a polygraph, then you're gonna lie about everything.
All right.
And so it's a big part of the job is trust because you get so much power, so much authority. You're around the President of the United States, you're really around secret environments, so to speak, and so they really need to know that you can just be dropped anywhere and it's okay. So it's really about the integrity of it.